Hello and welcome everybody to Imagination Labs, live on Imagination TV. And I'm here in this little gray cubicle in Manhattan in a big building that one of my friend here, who you'll get to meet later, is sort of also in the same building and kind of rents in some way. And I sometimes wonder, like I've been on quite a journey personally. So I'm Parul, PJ for short, for those of you who know me well or don't know me well. But yeah, the question I ponder over is like, how close am I to nature? How connected am I? Or how disconnected am I? And I've had the fortune of being in different countries. I was born in India, indigenous to that land, the Gondi people, and sort of the threads that connect me, even the threads that come from a tree in India that sort of connect me back to that land. And I have very strong relational web that sort of pulls me back there. 7 years. Italy has been home to me in some weird, wonderful ways. And now I'm beginning to find some beginnings of home here in New York. And I'm like, this is the most I've been removed from nature. This is the farthest I've been. And then when I look deeply and I question deeply, is that true? Is that really true? And the answer is no. The answer is like, there is nature within me. There is something inherently wild inside that cannot be tamed by the systems, by the landscape, by whatever. And there is this connection that goes way back, which I cannot intellectually understand. Even if I try to, I cannot gather like how far, how deep this runs in my blood, in my veins, in my DNA. And yeah, sometimes I just look up at the sky and I'm like, wow, people would have looked up at the same sky thousands of years ago. You know, people would have looked at the same stars or swam in the same waters. So there is this deep sense of continuity that nature provides to me. So today we'll be uncovering with a bunch of amazing human beings what the themes of nature and how might we build a custodial economy and return humans back to nature, if that is even possible. And I'll sort of frame it up by saying, okay, we know what's going on in the world. Most of us are switched on and awake to the fact that humanity is creating quite sort of devastating impacts on the climate currently. Again, is that our true role? Is that who we are? I think that's open for debate and open for question. And I think if we ponder over it deeply, we'll come to the point where we understand that that's not essentially the role of humanity. We are an integral part of this ecosystem that we find ourselves in. And in fact, we are it. We are nature. And I hope this is the journey we'll sort of go on today. And I'll introduce my fellow panelists and other amazing people I get to hang with in a minute. It's a beautiful Unlikely Connections ×5 panel, so get ready for it. But I think we might start with a big story and a zoom out. We might hear from Jack and Jane, because they had a moment together recently and we cut together this 5-minute video that we're sharing with you all. And I think that will set the frame for what's to come for the rest of the hour or so.
Human beings are just a puzzle, and we're all one piece in the puzzle.
Everything is interconnected, and you've got to find the right connection where you fit best.
Our economies in our indigenous systems, they're all relational. There's not a transactional, I gave this to you, now what do I get back? It's give into networks, which make the networks healthier.
And once you find the right place in this overall picture, then right there you can do your bit. And you're interconnected with all the other parts of the puzzle all around the world. And that includes people connecting with people connecting with other animals, and people connecting with the environment. The things that we really have to tackle if we want to make this a better world, we must do something about unsustainable lifestyles, because we've got a planet with finite natural resources, and some of these lifestyles are placing unrealistic demands on our natural resources, and they're disappearing in some places. So that's one, and that's a very tough one. And the second one is poverty, because until we alleviate poverty, you're going to get people destroying the environment just to survive, because they cut down the trees around Gombe just to get more land to grow more food for their growing families and to make money from charcoal or timber. And it was when I flew over Gombe and saw huge areas that were forest bare, that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, we can't save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else.
If we lose the process of that hope for each other and our relationships and our connection with each other, we might have lost the point of it, and it just becomes individual glory stories which are hard to connect to.
You know, we just have to remember that every day we live, we make some kind of impact. And if it was just me doing that, it wouldn't make any difference. But when you get hundreds, thousands, millions, maybe billions of people all thinking about how they live each day, then we'll start to move towards a better world.
I don't think hope is a sugar hit, and I think that if you're looking for quick hope, you're going to get, just like having sugar, there's going to be a very quick low that comes after it.
Hope is about action. And, you know, if you don't have hope, you won't bother to take action, because what's the point if you don't hope that it's going to be okay? I
feel like the rich hope is in the people like yourself and many people who may not have been acknowledged, you know, the hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of people that are doing big bodies of work to pass on the best energy they can of life on Earth to the next generation. And
if the young people lose hope, we've had it, we're doomed. And so to find a way for them to take action so that they feel enough hope, and they tell me, they say, I didn't have hope, but now I do. Not just young people, but older people too. So I really think this is one key element of somehow maintaining hope. Growing this network of care, of hope, that is something which I will devote the rest of my life to.
Yeah, so we're going to meet some amazing people today, but following on from what Jane said, yeah, young people, putting young people in the center of this redesign of the world we want to live in. And one of the things which some of you listening in, most of you would know, that we've been building this alternative network, this alternative, what we call a nation, a digital nation called IMAGI-NATION. And in my perspective, there has been like many reasons for why we find as humanity ourselves in this position, but one of the reasons is, say, like the leadership up the top hasn't delivered on what we thought it was going to be. And then there's multiple layers, and we'll uncover some of those layers. But where I see the greatest hope is the young people we work with. And these young people have the answers already. And our job, perhaps, aim is to sort of unlock these young people. And so one of the initiatives that we're very happy to be working with the Jane Goodall Institute and the Carmen Project and some of our partners, and as well as like Ethic and Earth Guardians as sort of associated partners, and Indigenous Knowledge Systems Lab as our knowledge partners, is the 1 million Presidents of IMAGI-NATION. Steph, I've been really lucky to work with you on that closely. We were doing some dreaming and designing on it even last week, and I think we cracked the frame at some point in the conversation. But do you want to introduce yourself and then take us on a little bit of a president's journey into your universe?
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun, that meeting. And that's when I know that something's going to work, is if we're having fun figuring it out. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Steph Beck, Vice Chancellor of IMAGI-NATION University. Been with AIM for about 6 years and worked in a few different spaces, but now really closely with Jack and the design team on the design of the nation, and looking at these processes of emergence and how we connect with other people. And a few of those, I've never seen that interview before, and I don't know how, but yeah, it's awesome. A couple of things that kind of struck with me that I've been thinking about is hope and how you pass that on as an energy. And I feel like it's in these action-focused stories. So if we're going out and connecting with people with the intention to build relationships with them, it's an action-focused story that we go out with, and then we make meaning and sense together in a place-based location. So someone from Australia and someone from India coming together to merge this intelligence. And then you end up with another perspective, which is something that's different, like a different type of thinking, which, according to Albert Einstein, can help us solve the problems that we have today. So yeah, it feels like we're really on the right path, and it's just wonderful to be able to work with so many other big thinkers and people in positions to be able to make some of these things a reality, and having the core of that network be young people, because they are a piece of the puzzle. Like, they help us build our perspectives as well. Like, I learned so much, and mostly what I learn is how much I don't know. So being able to make sense with other people and make meaning, I feel like these are the song lines and the pathways that actually weave the world together. And if we've got 1 million of these young people coming in and giving them a way to action some of their visions, yeah, it could be a whole new game.
Yeah, that would significantly shift the dial in some way for humanity, or so we hope, Steph. And in my mind, those like 1 million young people that we unearth as the presidents of this new nation, presidents of imagination, then become nodes in their own micro networks and sort of unleash this vision of impacting billions of people around the world, which is kind of how Jane ended that conversation. So I'll bring you into the weave, James, because you and I have been sort of dancing back and forth and sort of co-designing on how might we unlock these 1 million young people as well, and what journey they might go on with us. So would you want to introduce yourself and share a bit of the work we've been doing?
Yeah, thanks, PJ. And hi, everyone. I'm James. I'm the CEO at the Jane Goodall Institute here in Australia. But before I come to that, I'd perhaps just like to pick up on that interview as well, a bit like Steph just commented on. I've now seen that a couple of times, and every time I watch it, it brings up quite a lot of emotion in me. I think the conversation that Jane and Jack are having is a really powerful and important one, and it brought up this notion about nature as a great healer. The fact that in the face of something as awesome and as powerful as nature, and the way in which we function or don't function alongside it, as we could say in the modern world, that our role in nature has become so disconnected that we've lost that connection with its healing power. And we're seeing an epidemic, a global epidemic around mental health, narcissism, sociopathy, whatever kinds of disorders, mental disorders that are going on. And nature is a great antidote to these issues that we're facing psychologically, and the way in which we're building structures and institutions and societies, or we're deconstructing them by allowing these processes to flourish, and that's not helping anyone. And so I think reconnection to nature is not just essential for the sake of nature itself and the protection of biodiversity and respecting all living things. It's also essential for our futures, because I think if we don't have nature as a central part of the way in which we live and exist every day, then we are running ourselves out of business, if I can put it that way. I think we're facing, as human civilizations have faced over thousands of years, we're facing, and many are saying that we're living in the middle of now the 6th great extinction, and this is something that should concern everyone. But as Jane pointed out, one of her most powerful reasons for hope and the work that we're doing, and I'm so excited to be working on with AIM, is this nature studio. But the idea that we can, and our role in that, the Roots and Shoots program, which Jane started in Tanzania in 1991, it's now been going for 30 years and has a presence in 60 countries, its guiding principle is all about giving agency to young people, putting the power for them to make a decision about what they see as the problem and solving it and working on the solutions. And by doing that, that's engendering that hope into action, that the point that was made. Hope on its own is somewhat pointless, but hope with action is absolutely what is required. And so what excites me about the work we're doing together, PJ, is this idea that Roots and Shoots as a global movement can funnel young people by giving them access to information about nature at a local level in classrooms across Australia, and through a program that we've developed called Rewild Your School. We want to give access to every young Australian and eventually spread that out around the world. So that's not just a local Australian idea, but a global idea, that kids at school are learning about nature, learning about biodiversity, learning about their local connections and the values of those at a local level, and that can spread up into a broader community process, into business, into every aspect of our lives, which is what we need to do if we're going to address the biodiversity and climate crises we face. These things can't be handled just alone. They need to be thought of as, every sector involved, and every young person that hopefully we bring into Rewild Your School and that, in a sense, graduate through to becoming a part of 1 million presidents. These young people are going to go out into the world and fulfill whatever vocation or career that they want to fulfill, but wherever they go, they take with them an environmental practice and a sustainability mindset, so that all of the boat, if I can use the metaphor, rowing together is how we find the ultimate solution. And that's as Jane was saying in the video we just saw, that we've got thousands, millions, if not billions of people participating in making the world a better place. And that's what we're working towards. And I'm very excited to be working with the crew at AIM.
Well, the excitement is mutual, James, and amen to that. We say, like, I don't want false hope. I don't want hope without action, because that can be misleading, and that's not what is required in this hour. And we need to look at the biggest possible lens. We need to zoom out to the biggest possible systemic view, as you pointed out, and sort of find the interweaves and the connections. I'm here, James, on IMAGI-NATION, who make their speeches as the presidents of the nation, and then they connected to this global network through IMAGI-NATION, through the Roots and Shoots program, through all these sort of affiliated partners, and then they get to lead their own change projects. And there's another sort of like zoom out lens that we're going to play with now, because these million speeches don't just get collected in one place. They do, and that's inspiring in itself, but they go on a journey somewhere. And I think they might be leaving the confines of the planet. Is that right, Hannah?
It is, PJ. So
tell us about that. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Hannah, and then it's on an extraterrestrial journey, if you will.
Sure thing. So thanks so much for having me as part of this conversation. So my name's Hannah. I'm the managing director of the Carmen Project, which is a independent and nonprofit foundation which connects space leaders from all over the world. So essentially what we do is we work with, I suppose, stemming from what you said before, you're really talking about all of the different individuals who we need to empower to solve our collective issues as humanity. And you touched on before, PJ, the leadership at the top and the issues with them delivering on their responsibilities. And I suppose that's really who we work with at the Carmen Project, is a group of stakeholders at a decision-making level from both public and private sector in the space sector. So directors of different space agencies and private companies who are having quite significant impact on the future of humanity. So when you think about space, often you think about sort of, space exploration and, lunar missions and everything that's happening outside of our planet, which of course we're going to touch on today as well. But, the vast majority of the space industry is really looking at satellite technologies to map and monitor everything that's happening on our planet, here on planet Earth, in real time, and give us, critical data to help us map everything from, wildfires to deforestation, to ensuring that we can improve supply chain efficiency, coordinate disaster management, understand, biodiversity and how that's shifting and shaping in different critical regions of the world. So the vast majority of the space industry is really working on, say, downstream data and how we can work with that data. So what we do is, and it also comes into, I suppose, as well, what Jack and Jane were speaking about, which is, firstly, you need hope to inspire action. But what we also do is we work with leaders to ensure that they also have knowledge to inspire action. So ensuring that when they are making their decisions, they're not just making that from, their lens as, say, a leader working in the United States for NASA, but they're also very cognizant of the priorities and the perspectives coming out of, leaders coming from, say, Kenya or Costa Rica or Australia or New Zealand, wherever they may be in the world, because of course, everyone is experiencing regional priorities very differently, and ensuring, when you speak about space where things have impact at such a global level, there's a few things that arguably have impact globally more than space. They need to be cognizant of regions and disciplines and things, all of these pieces of the puzzle, other than what they're perhaps exposed to in their day-to-day work. So what we do is we ensure that we connect people and that they engage in, challenging dialogue and courageous dialogue about, the most challenging topics in space, the most challenging topics that we face as humanity. They understand their realm of influence and they're exercising that responsibly. So that's sort of what we do. But then a very another unique aspect of space is that it's a really exciting and beautiful lever for inspiration. And again, you touched on it before, PJ. I think every human on Earth, through all of the millennia of our existence, have had these moments of looking up to the stars and dreaming and thinking about, your place on the universe. And I think it's also a very humbling experience as well. And for children particularly, I mean, what we've also found is that space can be a great, introduction to futures and careers in STEM and everything else that you need in space. Space doesn't just need people coming from science and engineering. It needs lawyers, it needs policy people, it needs great communicators, it needs storytellers, it needs artists. Like we need everyone on board to care about this collective future. We need environmentalists, So what we can do with space is we can inspire an entire next generation to really think about their place on the Earth, not just here on planet Earth, but in the entire universe and how that works. So what we're doing with AIM is connecting with a great nonprofit called Club for the Future, which is a nonprofit branch of Blue Origin. There's, of course, a lot of, payloads that go up into space fairly often. And what they do is ensure that a certain percentage of payload is donated to inspire the next generation. So what we're doing with AIM is collecting all of the president's speeches from all the kids around the world and then taking them on a little journey around space, delivering them back here to Earth. And then we're going to do a big mural down at the AIM headquarters in Sydney. So we're going to plaster all of the, whether it's artwork or speeches from the presidents, whatever the youth from all around the world want to dream about in terms of their future as the presidents of this new nation, that can go on a journey. It can keep them engaged because they know that, what they're creating, what they're envisioning is not just sort of stopping here on this paper. It's going, out of the planet. It's going on a journey that is so unfathomable, even to adults, let alone, people who are still at this beautiful moment of their imaginations in their childhood, or in their adolescence. And then it can go on this journey and then all come back together and then be put into a beautiful artwork and display at AIM HQ. And then we're also looking into different types of curriculum together with AIM. So how we can potentially develop develop Professor Space, which we're working on, and looking at really bringing critical education around the future of science and engineering and all of these topics, and using that and understanding the power that data can have in tackling some of these issues and time critical challenges that we have on Earth. So many pieces to the puzzle, PJ.
Thanks, Hannah. That's super awesome. I think my internet might be a little bit patchy, but we'll see how we go. But I think, yeah, when I look up and think of space, and when I was hearing you speak about all made in NASA, sort of looking up and sort of saying, hey, it's not just about US, it's about all these other regions. I think what space does in some way is dissolve national boundaries. Because if you are to look out from outside of planet Earth and look back in, you'll be like, oh, it's one Earth, it's one planet. We've just created these fictional lines and called them nation states. And our job with this new nation, IMAGI-NATION, is to kind of rip apart some of those national borders that are completely mind-created and allow a nation state that connects, that is without borders, that brings people together. And so for me, that is one of the most inspiring story arcs of like a million people rising up, perhaps as the next generation of UN leaders or leaders around the world. And we sort of gather their voices and their visions, send them out to outer space, bring them back to Earth to live on beyond our time, to be the source of inspiration that we all look into. And now I'm going to bring you in, Johnny, and sort of like one of the questions that we've been pondering over is how do we build? For me, like it's complex that we have to put a dollar value on nature in order to value it. And I think Thais and the labs crew have been grappling with that quite a bit. It's like for me, nature is so inherently, intrinsically valuable that if it takes us a dollar sign to in the end say, hey, there's value here. Like, I think that's sort of a sign that we're pretty far down a rabbit hole we shouldn't have been in the first place. But how do we sort of rewire that rabbit hole, and what might this wisdom that we unearthed from a million presidents sort of feed into sort of what we're thinking of in terms of a custodial or nature-based economy? Johnny.
Thanks, PJ. So I'll just introduce myself quickly. I'm Johnny. I'm one of the co-founders at Ethic. We do sustainable investing. So we help people understand the values, the things that they care about, reflect those values in their current portfolio to see where maybe they're not aligned. And then we create new portfolios for them that are more aligned with their values, and sort of all the education around that. And really what we're doing there is trying to reconnect people with the things that they're investing in. So with transactional behavior, you sort of lose empathy for what your actions are because you're not connected. So we think of every portfolio as just a vehicle to tell stories and reconnect with. And then through that process, what we've been thinking about is how can we use a similar approach for looking at nature and giving people that may have a particular dollar value lens on something and giving them new, different lenses or portals into that. And so we've started to uncover a lot of different ways, and there's some really good thinking. So, the first thing is like, what can you actually measure? And so at the moment, it's actually the way, especially in the financial space, it's a little bit reductive of how they value nature. It's very, very much from an extractive point of view. And so as we're seeing different models come through where some people starting to think about like ecological system services. And then as we start to progress through these different models of thinking about the species richness, the interconnection between those, some of the work we've been doing with the labs has sort of brought out this custodial indicator species. And it's a very interesting journey of getting people to reconnect and rethink of how we are connected with nature. And it's a very exciting project that we're working on all together.
Yeah, totally. It's one of the greatest sort of head spin projects that I've been ever involved in, and it's got me contemplating a lot. I think you shared that video with us, Johnny, of like the value of a whale, and whatever that video was, like $3 million or something. I'm like, no, a whale is valuable like so much more, but that's the carbon sequestration service that it renders. And I sort of like think that that's still complex, that we need to put a dollar value. But the way you said, if it's used as a portal, if we use the dollar value, if we use currency as a portal to invite people that are not even looking at this, like a dead whale is more valuable economically than a live whale currently under current market conditions. And we use that sort of reframe lens of saying, hey, a live whale is a lot more valuable than a dead whale. And if we do it through big story, through ceremony, hopefully there's a way of moving people beyond the dollar, beyond the transaction, and sort of saying, hey, we are part of this interconnected web of life. Like what happens to the whale affects me. Like it's kind of me saying, oh, I can sort of like do whatever to my finger, I can bend it, I can break it, but it's going to hurt me. And that's effectively what I'm doing by harming the whale or another species. And I'm going to invite you in, Malika, because I know you've been doing some beautiful work in trying to integrate the different species and sort of generate through the game that you've been building. And you were chatting with us just before about growing up in urban India and how your images of nature have not involved humans until so far, and how that's shifting. So tell us a bit of your story and what you all are up to with us.
Thanks, PJ. Just a quick intro. I'm Malika. I'm co-founder of Earth Guardians. We basically develop technology that gets people closer to nature, either through having fun, which is through a game, or through exchanging stories and knowledge about land, which is through our Oracle of Life. At the end of the day, what we would like to do is, we know we all feel like, every day the technology is changing and it's removing us further away from nature, or away from what it intrinsically means to be human.
Hey, Malika, we're just losing you a little. Okay, if you can hear us, maybe you can turn off the video. Okay. Yeah, technology. Thank God we don't control technology, which is why we have a special guest joining us. And this is the hidden sort of guest, and it's not hidden at all, but oh, there's someone here. Is that a professor joining us?
Hi, PJ. You know me, Professor Song.
Song. So good to see you.
Hannah. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Professor Song.
How are
Lovely
you?
to see you again.
Yeah, you too. We're talking about nature and custodial species today, yeah?
That's it. That's it, Prof.
What a
Song.
great topic. And the role that young people play in that whole relational economy. And I've been lucky enough to join PJ in helping to shape and deliver this as a project. And I can't wait to get in and do some painting and spin all the ideas around in my brain, pour them out, put them on the canvas and see what everyone thinks.
I can't tell you how excited I was to hear the news, Prof. Song, that you'd be joining us as the lead thinker, researcher, designer on this project. And maybe we'll compose a song about it with this crew at some point. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be great. Make a song about making song lines. When I think about these young people, it's like, could you imagine being born with paintbrushes for hands and not having any paint to paint with? I think that's what we're doing, is we're taking young people into the centre, and the paint is us. the people, the organizations, the universities, the school. We give them access to time, knowledge, and opportunities so they can paint the visions of the future. And then it happens. Tell the story, make sense, make meaning, then it happens. Like magic.
Magic happens, doesn't it? I love that story, Prof. Song, of, yeah, paint brushes and us just being paint. All of the organizations here, and we're just adding maybe a color to the palette, and together we'll paint a canvas beautiful than any of us individually can.
So, well, it was nice to see you all. I've got to fly. I've got a flying lesson actually with the butterflies. So take care. See you soon. Bye.
See you, Prof. Song. I want to learn about flying too. It's been one of my childhood dreams. Hannah's been doing some flying of her own. So we'll just open it up now. There's layers and there's weaves here that we can jump into. We can go down many rabbit holes. I think there's like the story arc of the presidents that we just uncovered, of how we build this new nation to unite rather than divide. We give the stage for young people from around the world, from outside the margins, because this is like their time to shine. And one of my favorite space stories, which I'll reserve for later, we'll come back to it hopefully at some point, is sort of like elevating their voices into extraterrestrial space and giving them the stage to lead, and then having an installation. Because yeah, STEM is one thing that moves people, science, technology, whatever, but there's also art. There's STEAM, and when you add art, it becomes like hot and messy and fun, and then you sort of move people through energy, through action, through STEAM, through something else. So I want to play in that space of story. I want to play in that space of imagination of what happens with the presidents, and then how that might impact the whole system underneath it. Because if we don't shift the economic frameworks of how we value things in the world, we're going to be stuck, and we might get a bit of hope, we might get a bit of false hope even, but the system remains the same, and we haven't turned humanity back to its custodial role in nature. And I think sort of merging those two worlds, merging the young people's story and the narrative of hope with, like, again, sort of systemic change that happens, that young people lead in their local communities, but also we as a collective get to sort of shift the custodial economy and the economic frameworks around. So I see you're back, Malika. If you can keep your video off, and if you still want to have another shot at just audio, I'll let you know how that goes. If it doesn't go, fine, like I'll sort of briefly explain what you all are doing with us. But let's see, over to you.
Thanks, PJ. I think the connection is probably a bit better now. So yeah, what I was basically saying was we basically develop technology that gets people closer to nature, because at the end of the day, we're all creatures that want to have fun, want to enjoy with our, close friends, family, and we also want to feel closer to nature. So, and the way we do it is, one, as a game. We all, we're all quite immersed in our screens, really. If you look around, everybody's looking at their screen at any time of the day. So we felt, how about if we use that medium to get people closer to nature? So Guardians of Earth, the game, is basically location-based game that gets you out finding life forms, and there's points allocated to finding various creatures, and then over time you accumulate a collection, you get points, you get rewards. So there's the typical game features of rewards, incentives, motivations to do various things, but it has a purpose, and the purpose is, at present, we have about the knowledge of life forms on Earth is very sparse. We know maybe roughly 30% of all that's alive on our planet. And of that, a majority of it is, from the developed world. And of that, about roughly 80% of it is from within 2.5 kilometers of a paved road. So in other words, the world is a black hole for us. We don't really know what's living and where it is living. So if you were to think of, from a conservationist perspective, what do you save and where do you start? You really are working in a black hole. You don't know. What is the first species you want to save? Maybe that's the keystone species of that habitat. You wouldn't know. So the first step is we need to figure out what is there. And that's what this game is doing. It's letting people have fun. It's letting them become aware of the environment around them. But at the same time, at the back end, it's making sure that all these beautiful people are collecting data on the biodiversity that's present around wherever they're living, so that we can go and give that to scientists and researchers and say, okay, you have the information, now start making use of it and figuring out ways of what's most important and where. So that's kind of the science purpose behind the game. But at the end of the day, even people, unless if people know about biodiversity, I feel there's not much hope in us trying to save biodiversity. It's like, if you look at the moment, it's quite the, what should I say, the trend to say, well, AI can solve most of our problems. Unfortunately, maybe AI can recognize the problem because we tell it that this is the problem, but all the knowledge that AI or any of these, generative AI tools have is basically human generated. So if a scientist or if a person with indigenous knowledge doesn't explain to some piece of technology somewhere that this is so and so, and this is what happens when it disappears, there's no way to document that knowledge to move forward. So there's no way AI will know that anyways. So we feel it's important that humans are understanding biodiversity, humans are aware of biodiversity, so that collectively we can solve once humans become familiar with biodiversity, there's no way they're going to go back and go, no, I don't like nature. I'm just going to stick to my, concrete spaces and my technology. It is a natural progression. Once you become aware of it, you kind of fall in probably, or you're intrigued, then you're more curious, and then eventually you fall in love, and then there is no going back from there. And that's what we hope we can achieve with Guardians of Earth game. The other aspect of our technology is we enable people to share their stories, their knowledge. We know that a lot of people that live on the land have a very different relation with land compared to those of us that live in urban settings, are not so much connected to land. We would like that knowledge to not disappear. A lot of it has already disappeared. We would like to make sure that knowledge is saved and it's shared. And we also want to make sure that it's shared in a way that's ethically responsible, that it is aware of the ownership of that knowledge. So that's one of the pieces of technology we have built, which we call it the Oracle of Life. And given the economic conditions in some parts of the world, we want to make sure that whoever is sharing their knowledge is also financially remunerated for that. So that's part of that. And the last piece of what we're doing is creating digital replicas of physical locations. We call those realms or enchanted realms. Basically, we all own pieces of land, say, it's probably your ancestral home or this little unit you're renting in urban lands. What we do is we create digital replicas that show exactly what life forms are present in and around your, in your property, and score it, give various features of what's present in it, what probably might be lacking in it, and also explain how your piece of land is different or is comparing with the rest of the region around your home or property. Basically, all we're trying to do with the realms is educating landowners, property owners that, hey, this is what your land is going through. Here is the data. Here is how you can make it better so that your region is in harmony with the rest of the place around you. You could be living close to the rainforest, but if you have chopped everything down and put concrete in your property and are growing cacti, then I'm sorry, that's the wrong place to do that. And we would like to bring your land in harmony with the rest of the land around you. So that's the idea. So these are the three pieces we work on and are integrating them all together. So at the end of the day, if a corporation is bringing out, say, creating sugarcane, it's manufacturing sugar, then it knows what its supply chain is, where it's located, and what is its impact. We can measure that as well. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
That's beautiful, Malika. And yeah, we've been really inspired by the game tech. And as I hear you speak, some of the things around how do we save other species on? And if there's one species to save, I think it's humanity. I think all other species perhaps are sort of affected by the way we are moving across the landscapes and the explorations we've had, Malika, of like humans sort of like going down this rabbit hole, and yeah, scientists collectively have called Earth on red alert, humanity on red alert. And that seems like one hole that is increasingly we're digging for ourselves and there's no return. But when I heard you speak, Malika, I think there's another pathway, another portal where we start walking in closer connection with nature, using the reward systems we have, using the tech we have. And once you like understand that little bird or how that bird plays a part in that ecosystem, you can't help but fall in love with the story that's happening all around us, you know? And it's possible to do it even in urban landscapes. I think it requires perhaps a bigger story to move people in urban landscapes. And I'm going to call out a couple of things. One is the podcast yarn that some of the people on this call, I think it was you, Johnny, Malika, I don't know if you were there, James, perhaps, and a few others did on like custodial economics in Tyson Young-Porter's podcast. So we're singing the Labs crew in. They've been doing amazing thinking and deep research on how might we sort of build a nation, which then unlocks the presidents, but also how might we move the economy towards this way of thinking and being. So we're just singing them in. And then the other aspect is like Jack and some of the other ink crew will soon be traveling to LA and SF and New York and Paris and London and Geneva and Bath, and we'll be taking over different, mostly urban landscapes, mostly like concrete spaces, and through human story and relations, take us back into a space of reconnecting with our inner nature, which then hopefully leads to us sort of reconnecting with outer nature. James, take yourself off mute. And now it's just like I want this to be an open yarn for the next little bit. So whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
Thanks, PJ. I just wanted to pick up on something Malika said about the realms and about recreating, in a sense, the environment around you as an individual. And this is where the beauty of Rewild Your School that we're developing plugs into this process. And I thought it would be really useful to sort of explain that in a little more detail and how that lines up with the great work that Earth Guardians are doing. Because through Rewild Your School, young people get to choose a champion animal and then understand that animal's life cycle. So they go through a process of actually assessing what that animal needs to survive, what it preys upon, what preys on it, its place in the ecosystem. And once a student learns that, they're able to apply that knowledge. And this also builds in both Western and Indigenous knowledge systems as well. But they're able to apply that knowledge to any species. So then when they engage with Earth Guardians and they're playing that game, they can bring that knowledge about, okay, well, I've identified what's around me. Now I've already got that system through Rewild Your School to understand what I need to do to address that problem locally. And if you imagine that being repeated thousands or millions of times, the power of that in terms of transformational change, particularly in urban areas, is really, really powerful. And I just wanted to really quickly just pick up on something Johnny said as well, if I may, around measuring nature and how typically through the finance world, that's thought of through a very reductive and an extractive way. One of the partnerships we've also developed is with the University of Adelaide. And what we're doing there is measuring nature-based education and how that impacts positively on young people and outcomes. And it would be really interesting to sort of roll that up into a broader sense of how we're measuring nature, as I spoke about before, in this sort of sense of nature as a healer, as a process through which we can have better physical, mental health outcomes that are positive for everyone. But I think, thinking about those sorts of measures rather than, the point that Johnny made about how typically nature, or how it is being measured quite often now in a sort of extractive sense, would be a really powerful thing to add to that kind of lexicon of metrics and how we think about nature from a, that process of needing to measure something that is sort of priceless in a way that we don't want to put a measure on, but in a way of converting that into a kind of a lay understanding with the world at large, and for them to be able to make sort of an immediate sense of it and translate that into, I guess, a language that's familiar in the finance markets anyway.
Yeah, totally, James. And the more I reflect on how might we truly value nature, if we truly have to value nature against human dollars, then yeah, this is, I don't know, perhaps another reductive frame, but it's actually probably the most zoomed out frame. Johnny and the rest of the crew is like, everything we've ever created as human beings is from nature. Like all of our global economies, everything is from nature. And that's who we are. If we really remember who we are, then that frame comes back to like, okay, how do we value this thing? How do we truly value something so invaluable? And we're a part of this web. We're not separate from it. So yeah, I'll open up the space. Hannah?
Yeah, I often, oh, sorry, Hannah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I often think of things in sequence. So like, if the place where we get to today is putting $1 of value on something like a whale, what's the next step that we can go to? Because there's an understanding, a collective understanding that will happen during that process. And then what does that then change in our behavior? And I guess, everything with economics and the little that I know about it is it's just what we value. And having a global community of people shifting what they value, I think is probably like the tension point of where we're at. And then there's so many different ways and perspectives that people are looking at that. So if we're not sharing knowledge in a way that allows us to make meaning, reevaluate our values, and which then shapes our behavior, yeah, it's we're just living by the same script, I think, which is probably part of the problem. But yeah, I think that there's also sequencing in knowledge, and I've been thinking about the different states that it lives in. So there's tools that we get to use, and how we develop those tools. What mindset is that developed through? Is it for, well, want to put your attention here so you can't focus on these things that you really want to, which is like mass extinction, and then how we build tools that are coded with a set of behavior that is, imagination is the doorway in, removing these reductive mindsets or frameworks that we often look at each other through without even knowing, and not even each other, like a tree or a bird or any of those things. So yeah, I've been thinking about the state changes of knowledge and the different energy that's needed at different phases to allow it to move into a liquid, which takes the shape of any vessel, which could be then knowledge that anyone could use and have it as a place-based thing, and then it emerges into something different.
Yes, Steph, and that was for me the greatest gift when we were yarning last week around us sort of like sequencing the president's journey of like, this is where they sort of come into our universe, this is what they sort of like experience afterwards, and then this is how it shifts, and yeah, what are our fundamental assumptions and how that journey, and that's a beautiful sort of journey to think through for an investor or someone sort of saying, yeah, I'll put my money against whale, and again, like with the game that Malika and crew are building, the idea that, okay, we can call this bird X and X, or this tree is this Latin binomial name, but unless I have a story attached to it, and this is where the voices of the people that are intrinsically very closely connected to that landscape becomes so crucial, that's when I get moved. That's when I understand, and what you were saying before, James, is like, if you can pass down that knowledge to the kids and make them see their role in the wider ecosystem, and perhaps if we had the cultural indicator species that the Rewild Your School program sort of took to kids in their local biomes and bioregions, then game on. Then we perhaps might just shift some of these systems that hinder. Hannah, you were going to add something.
Yeah, so I mean, It's also complex, and that's also why I am so inspired by what AIM's doing in terms of this, because I mean, you're talking about shifting huge global mindsets. And I think what we're also really talking about a lot is connecting humans with the digital and understanding the power that digital understandings and mapping can have for, you know, all of these problems that we're facing, you know, the critical acute problems that we're facing as humanity. And that's what, and as Malika was saying before, it's really about working with, you know, on one hand, we need to lean into digital technologies to understand and map things properly, but then that means nothing without the power of the human knowledge. And I think this is also an important aspect that we're really dealing with in space. And a project that we're doing at the moment is, well, we will be doing later in the year, is taking a delegation of space leaders to the Maldives, which is, you know, one of the parts of the world which is incredibly vulnerable to a rapidly changing climate. You know, the highest point in the Maldives is 1.2 meters above sea level, and you're talking about a nation of 1,200 very small islands with an incredibly rich biodiversity that's so at risk right now. So we're really taking this group of leaders out of their boardrooms into the Maldives in direct proximity of all of these issues, which we speak about all the time, understanding how to utilize, you know, satellite technologies and space technologies to map and monitor and better understand everything from, you know, the mangrove ecosystems to the illegal fishing, which is impacting the region and everything that's happening. But I mean, this knowledge means nothing without tapping into that local and Indigenous knowledge that exists there, because it needs to be very much, you know, you need to paint this global picture of what's happening there. And digital technologies and digital understanding can only take you so far. And in space, there's this big concept of creating a digital twin of the Earth. So this multi-layered digital understanding of what our Earth is, from all of the different layers of, you know, infrared technologies and all the different technologies that we're empowered to map our Earth with as humans. But again, I think there's a big risk with the digital Earth and digital twin modeling if you don't take in the human aspect and that rich history of human knowledge. So I think the digital is incredibly powerful and critical for our future, but it means nothing without the human and tapping into that local knowledge. And that's why I think, you know, what Guardians of the Earth is doing, it's sort of bringing up that bottom-up knowledge and tapping into people on the ground, on the Earth. And then I also think, you know, what's so interesting about all of the different initiatives, and I love this UNC by 5 and bringing them together, because on one hand, I think, you know, when you look at what's happening, you have the acute problems and you need to tackle you need to tackle the leadership, you need to tackle the adults who are in the driver's seat right now, particularly when you consider the timeframes that we're dealing with, you know, the time critical challenges that we're dealing with in climate right now. And, you know, as Johnny's alluded to, you know, economies can shift behavior. So that's why it's so powerful when you look at, you know, the power of, you know, what you can do in terms of shifting behaviors around investment and making people make more responsible decisions in that, because, you know, capital is a big way at the moment that, you know, people think in terms of the economy. And I suppose that's a very powerful tool. So you sort of need to tap into the decision makers at the moment to think about, okay, how can we tackle these acute problems? But then it's so important when you're talking about future proofing and what the next step is, to think about the next generation and then how we empower them with knowledge and changing behaviors. And that's where all of the initiatives like Guardians of the Earth and what Jane Goodall's doing with Roots and Shoots, and, you know, this is so important and powerful. And that's why, again, all of these initiatives need to be speaking to each other, because digital means nothing without the human, and then we can empower the next generation, but we also need to think about the current decision makers and how they're exercising this influence responsibly, because we only have a small time frame to get things in order right now as well. So everyone has to be speaking to each other, and that's why I love that you've brought us all together as well.
Yeah, it's one of our greatest joys, Hannah, is to bring unlikely connections together, mash them up in this goop, and then see what emerges. And lots of beautiful things have emerged from this particular group of 5. And I just want to take a moment to solidify and hear from each of you as to, and this is maybe a bit of a setup question too, because it's, okay, live on Imagination TV, AIM's platform, but I think you alluded to it already, but what makes you like excited to be working with us at AIM? Like we are personally, and what are you committing to with us? Personally at AIM, we commit to bringing more and more of these unlikely connections by a factor of 5 to some of the biggest challenges facing humanity today. And we're going to say we don't have all the answers, but we're really good at finding the people that are doing amazing work. And we're really good at sometimes drawing the lines in between the dots, which needed to be joined in the first place. And collectively, we can sort of reimagine some of the systems, and I'll paint us a vision of where we're going from our end. But I'd love to hear from all of you, like what excites you about sort of being in relation with AIM, and what work do you see 10 years from now when AIM ceases to be? What is the thing that we would have done together and you would have been like, oh man, that was amazing. That was joyful. So give me a vision 10 years from today of like the time when AIM officially shuts down and you're looking back and we're sitting down somewhere, all 5, 6 of us, and sort of saying, hey, remember when we did that? What is that thing?
If I may go first, I think 10 years from now, I'm hoping we don't have to do these. I'm hoping none of us exist as these entities. We're just human beings enjoying living on this planet in harmony. I know it seems very far-fetched, but one can always hope. And I think we're working collectively, all of us here are working towards that future. And I'm hoping all this will be dissolved in 10 years and we'll just be happy, in harmony. That's how I see.
That's not far-fetched at all, Malika. That's near-fetched. Let's do it. I hope to sit with you somewhere in India and sort of like wander and look at trees together or do something fun like that together.
I'd love to jump in there and just say, in 10 years' time, every young person on the planet, that part of their education at school is integrated with nature. It's not just about learning about maths and languages and history and so on. That nature-based education is an essential and respected part of the curriculum, and not some kind of add-on or nice to have, but an essential part. And I think the work that we're doing here, PJ and Steph and the whole AIM crew is driving towards that future state, and so that in the wake of AIM's death strategy, that there's a legacy of every young person in Australia and around the world who are learning about nature from the get-go, and then they're passing that on to their children and their children's children, and then it becomes inherently an oral tradition, not just about what you learn from a textbook or in written form. And I think that would be a wonderful thing when we get to that stage.
Johnny, I see you have your mic on.
Okay, I'll go quickly. Maybe just to take something Steph said and to weave it in terms of sequencing. I think so much of it is the way that we design. We've been designing, from a user-centric experience, and we've been trying to get outcomes that sometimes aren't very good for humans. So taking people's attention and designing things for that. We've moved over to more human-centric approach, and it's forgetting everything else and just designing things for the comfort of humans. And we've seen how that can also have a very negative effect where we're not incorporating the externalities. And, we're moving over, at least some people, into a life-centric design. So I'm trying to incorporate all different species and life into the design of a product. And going one step further, it's the Indigenous systems knowledge design, which is really what we want to get to. And after the 10 years, not only just enjoying the journey and the amazing people that come through the path with AIM, because it's already been such a blessing for myself, but how do we create and put Indigenous knowledge systems labs in every organisation, in every university, so that design can be utilised by everyone to sort of really help us create the future that we want to believe that we can live in.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on both what, James and Johnny have said here. I think that, well, firstly, I'm sort of glad that we have, 10 years notice about the end of AIM, because I can already start the grieving process from, in principle, I understand, to think that the idea is that these initiatives won't be needed anymore because we would have made so much impact together with all of our networks and all of these relations that, these initiatives aren't needed anymore. That is so beautiful and so powerful and so potent. And I deeply hope that we're in that position. But also from a community perspective, as well as Johnny said, I think that AIM has such a unique and beautiful community. And that's something that I suppose I already feel such sadness about, that, but communities live well beyond, initiatives. And I think that that's something that all of us can attest to. So from what James was saying, I agree that we need to be much more nature centric. And I think that we will. I really believe in this next generation. I believe as well that, when I think about the conversations that have become normalized and rhetoric that is becoming normalized now from a, political point of view and an organizational perspective, the fact that environmental social governance, sustainable responsibility is not just, for many companies, of course, it is still something that is just sort of a box that they have to tick. But I think many people are so cognizant of this responsibility, because I think the message is finally getting through that, this isn't just something that's nice to consider, it's critical to consider, and that it's absolutely essential to our survival as a species, as humanity, as a planet. And I really think that that message is translating and it's resonating. And I feel like I have a lot of faith that we will become more nature-centric, and we are becoming more nature-centric because we have to be. And then also picking up on what Johnny said, I think that particularly, we have such an opportunity here to centre Indigenous knowledge and intelligence. And I really hope that in 10 years, that is at the centre, of our Australian narrative and of, all the narratives worldwide. And, Jack wrote a really powerful piece just last week that was disseminated about the voice and the fact that we can tap into one of the most intelligent, resilient cultures and make that so much part of our everyday life. And this is such a beautiful opportunity. And, we should be seizing this. And I really hope that in 10 years' time, it's not a conversation anymore about whether or if, or, it's something that, it should just be part of everyone's life, and it should be leading the way. And I think that we're getting on that journey, and it's taken far too long, but I really feel like, that's where I hope that we are in 10 years. And I think that AIM is so critical to that journey. So that's my vision, my hope.
Beautiful. I'll build on that. But yeah, Hannah, I've had like this visualization kind of come into my mind about this relational economy that's forming. And I think Indigenous systems thinking is the key to the operation of it, like how to keep it healthy. And then what I see in 10 years, all these little plot points across the planet, almost like Batman signals, except their imagination beams, kaleidoscopes that other people know relational values, relational economics is valued here. And then that's a way that we can transition out of this transactional economics that we have in this very extractive model. But, in 1,000 years, I hope that some of the mass extinction events that we're experiencing now serve as like cautionary tales, and there's new languages that have emerged to represent the life that we're living. So I'm excited about story as well, and how we shape that and tell that for it to become our reality, and it's great to be building it with you all. So very hopeful, and I'm feeling it all as well, which I think is important for learning.
Totally, Steph. Like, I'm feeling it really strongly, just having spent the last hour with you, 5 beautiful human beings. And I'll do a quick recap to say, yeah, with you, Malika, we're painting a vision where there are none of our organizations and none of these systems that put us in extractive holes, and we're sort of like free to play and create and be in nature and in relationship with each other, which is, in my mind and in a lot of Indigenous sort of systems thinking lenses, the true position of humanity. Our true ecological niche is to be custodians of the landscapes and the environments we're in. And with you, Johnny, we're sort of like infiltrating all these organizations, systems, and centering Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous systems thinking from the beginning of the design queue in that sequencing journey that you mentioned. And you sort of like took us on a journey and finally said, and then we go towards Indigenous knowledge systems thinking. But it's also the most ancient, it's also it's a full sort of circle, and it's beautiful to sort of see like step by step and then return to the origin. And that for me is super hopeful. With you, James, and Jane Goodall Institute, we would have like shifted the face of education, because nature will be centric to everything we do in terms of schools and schooling and our future generation. And then they become the teachers and pass on the notes, which we've done as a species, as Indigenous peoples around the world, all our lives. This is how we've passed knowledge through the years, through oral histories, through stories. And with you, Hannah, and the Common Project, we sort of like have a brief intergalactic or interplanetary moment of going out in space together with the kids' voices and visions. But we also come back and remember that we are so nature-centric. When we look out, when we zoom out from this massive view, we remember that there's one finite planet. And remember how I said I'm going to reserve my favorite space story till the end, and I'm going to use it in a minute, but I'll sort of come to you, Steph. And one of the greatest joys for me of working with AIM, there are many joys, but one of the greatest joys is our relation and the connection we've had. And I've seen you go like working sort of in a program position to then designing the uni collectively, and now you're like flying in sort of the nation design and all these other designs that we're working on together. And I'm so really grateful to be learning from you, with you every day. And it's been such a joyful journey. So I'll blurt out my space story, and then we have some more interesting humans to hear from. That's a brief 2-minute clip, but it'll leave you inspired and ready to change the world if you're not already. But my favorite story is when humans sort of said at some point, what if there's life beyond us? What if there's life outside this planet? And I think it was that Voyager mission that might be familiar to several of us. We got together, we got a group of humans to sort of put together some of the biggest, vastest, wildest human creations, from the sounds and the languages we had invented to the music and the dances and the images and videos, and we put it onto a golden record, like a physical record, and we etched it with markings so that if an extraterrestrial life were to come upon it, they would know what to do, that they would know that you have to take the pin and sort of put it on the record, and it would start spinning out sounds and visuals and images, and something magical will happen in that sort of golden record. And that for me is like one of the most profound moments of like, humans did have this vast, wild imagination. We still have that vast, wild imagination. And for me, this group of 5 here represents in some weird way that golden orb, the golden disc, the golden record. And so I thank you all. And we listen to a little moment of wisdom from the young people who are going to be the future presidents of imagination. And we'll say goodbye on that note.
Imagination is the source of our creativity.
Creativity is important for teenagers because it just helps us create a life that we want.
I imagine When we can all come together, imagine how we can change the world. Imagine how we can help others.
Stop keeping us a secret and let the world know that we're here.
To the Prime Minister and Education Ministers across Australia. Today, we ask you to imagine what's possible.
My self, spirit and world is fueled by imagination, but my fears are based on reality. I fear for the future. I fear that the seas will not be home to the totems that inspire us. I fear for the land that our ancestors fought for, and I fear for the air we breathe. My imagination is big, but my fears are even bigger.
With no imagination comes no creation. With no creation, there is no future for our world.
Make your imagination your greatest weapon against poverty, pollution and corruption. Please, use it to your advantage.
I want you all to create. Create whatever you want to make the world a better place. But first, I want you to imagine.
Okay, this is when we're still not supposed to speak, so share your deeper secrets here. Come on, give us a secret, people.
Anything juicy? Oh gosh.
Truth or dare?